I've been using the MacBook Neo for a few weeks. And I'm genuinely surprised on what it can do, but there are a few things that maybe not want to recommend it to everyone. I think first of all, this review is going to be different. I think compared to other reviewers, I'm not going to compare it to the MacBook Pro because that's like buying a hatchback Golf and then comparing it to a Porsche. But I'll give you recommendations. If you're a student, if you're a basic user, a traveler, or business user, I'm going to give you my recommendations on should you get this laptop or not, because everyone's use case is going to be different. But you can't compare it to a MacBook Pro. That's like comparing it, a Volkswagen, a Golf to like a Porsche that costs like 4 times the price. And comparing it to MacBook Pro is ridiculous. I think Chromebooks are what you would compare in the same price category, and this, it blows Chromebooks away, I would say, how good this is. Now, go in detail the pros and cons, and that will determine whether you should buy it. But in terms of the price, I'm going to be honest. In the UK, you get it for $599. The only downside is you don't get, unfortunately, the plug. I think all in EU, you don't get the plug. It's only a 20-watt charger. But I think for $599 with the student discount of $499, I think it's an absolute steal. It's a must-buy entry level into the Mac, especially if you're coming from Windows. This is a good time to basically convert. Check out my video on my other channel where I give you my top tips on converting from Windows to Mac and how to get started in a beginner guide for Mac. What does it do well? I'm going to be honest, it does single core performance or general use cases. It performs exceptionally well. It's crazy how you can actually edit 4K content on this laptop. I did it. It doesn't actually struggle that much. You could use this for every single day. If you open 15 tabs, you have Spotify open, you have YouTube open, you have Netflix open, I'm going to be honest, it doesn't actually struggle. The single core performance is actually better than the M1 MacBook Pro when that came out. I still have that, the 2020 version. I use that as kind of like my daily runaround laptop that I just carry with me because it's lightweight. But the single core performance is really good. When I heard there was an iPhone chip inside, I'll be honest, I was a bit skeptical. But compared to other Chromebooks and what it can run, it performs extremely good. You can actually technically even run games on it. Would I recommend it? Of course not. But you can run Cyberpunk at 30 frames per second. So if you're a bit of a geeky person, I've put the scores of the single core and the multi-core in, but I'll be honest, for general everyday tasks, it's more than enough. People are saying it's not, they're making this review like they're talking as from like someone like myself, a content creator, talking about using it as their every single day daily driver, like editing 4K videos at all these different tracks. That's not the average person. Battery life, it will last you an entire day. Let's say you're a student, you charge it in the morning, you take your laptop with you. It's USB-C anyway, so you can plug it in basically anywhere. It'll probably give you, I would say, about 9 to 10 hours, I would say, at a moderate brightness, assuming you're not doing some crazy workloads like, editing nonstop. But I think it will still last you all day. So I think as a daily laptop, let's say you want to use this, the battery life is second to none. Compared to a Windows laptop, it's much better. And just to give you an example, this is the X13. This is a £2,000 Windows laptop that I use as basically my run-around Windows laptop. It costs £2,000, and this probably lasts me 4 hours if I'm lucky, if I'm taking this on a flight. And the worst thing is I have to use the Asus charger. So for £2,000, my Windows laptop, I'll be honest, it doesn't last me that long in terms of battery power. So that's where the MacBook Neo really excels. Now, what about if you're using this for Zoom meetings? The camera, to be honest, is more than decent. To be honest, I'm genuinely quite surprised how good the camera is. I'll be honest, nowadays, I expect the new MacBook Pro to have a 4K camera. It gets the job done. It's more than good enough, to be honest. Same with the microphone quality. It's very, very good. Just an example of the video quality. As you can see, I've just got my PC fan in the background, but audio quality is quite good in a small room, and you can see even the video quality for its price is more than good enough. I think for its price, I think that's the most important thing. Comparing this again to a MacBook Pro, of course, the MacBook Pro is much better, and maybe you could argue it's worth upgrading for the Air if you really want those things. But to be honest, the camera, apart from using it in low light, for Zoom meetings, it's more than acceptable, and it's actually really good. So for FaceTime, it's a really good option. The microphone, again, the same thing. The speakers are actually decent as well. Again, they're not amazing. They don't really distort too much. They're quite loud for what it has. It's got side-firing speakers, one on each side. But again, I think for its price point compared to other Chromebooks in the same category, I think the speakers are decent. There's no point me putting a microphone next to it. I would say go into the Apple Store and listen to it for yourself. Play your favorite music. It hasn't got crazy bass. That's the only thing. It doesn't rumble or anything like that. It's a good thing, but it hasn't really got that bass profile. It's probably the only thing that I would say. Now we're going to go to the build quality. Absolutely insane. When they released this, honestly, I thought they would make it out of plastic. But the fact that they made it out of aluminium, and bearing in mind, most Chromebooks for the similar price, even better prices, are made out of plastic, some of them, where you're getting a full aluminium unibody effectively for a much cheaper price than some of the top ones. So the build quality, second to none. The fact that they've kept it at this price with the build quality is insane. It not being plastic, it being very responsive, it having all the basic stuff that an average person would need. It's the most important thing. Even the display is really good. The brightness can go up all the way, and it is genuinely quite bright. You can use it outside, of course, not in direct sunlight. It has kind of a glary, as you can see, kind of a glary, if I put it like that in front of the screen. So it does glare a little bit in the sun, but that's with all computers, is it not? Unless you have an anti-glare cover. But the screen is really good. It doesn't have True Tone, which maybe is one of the downsides, but that's what they want to push us towards the MacBook Air. But the liquid retina display, I think they call it, it is really good. If you're watching videos, you're just browsing the web, it's nice and crisp. You're not going to have a bad screen. This screen's probably better than most Chromebooks you can probably see out there. And it's really good. You know, you can watch high quality content, 1080p without no struggles. You're watching movies. This is actually a top tier media consumption laptop. So even if you're editing like on Photoshop or you're color grading, it's actually quite color accurate as well. One thing I wanted to mention is not only is it snappy, it's basically silent. You cannot hear anything. Even when you run a lot of programs, it's basically fanless. There is no sound. If I compare this to my Windows laptop, even though this has got some insane specs, it sounds like a plane is taking off in my back garden or inside my room. In fact, it sounds like a 747 or A380 is turning up. So that is one of the biggest pros with using the MacBook Neo. Then I want to talk about the best parts, the keyboard and the touchpad. Now, both of them are exceptionally good. The keyboard is amazing. It's basically the same as the MacBook Pros and the MacBook Airs. I think if you're coming from a Windows laptop, you actually really love it. But the biggest thing for me is the touchpad. Now, I've used Chromebooks in the past. One of the biggest things that annoy me is that they're so awful. Like, you know, when you try to drag something or you try to use even basic Photoshop, they just can't do it. Well, this laptop, it just feels so smooth. Go ahead to the Apple Store, try it yourself. You'll be so surprised. One of the biggest thing that kills all these cheap laptops is a very cheap touchpad. Now, I'll be honest, this is not the haptic touch. It's like the old school, you know, like the old Intel Macs. Yeah, like the old mechanical button. This is basically a button, and actually, to be honest, it's actually really good. I'll be honest. Some people actually might prefer this over the haptic touchpad, but I'll be honest, the touchpad is really good. If you're remote desktoping, which I do quite a lot, let's say I have my main computer, which is like 100 gigabytes of RAM, 5090 or whatever it is. I think it's 4090 actually on this one. I've got 16 core processor. Sometimes I'm just remote desktoping in, but with a Chromebook, it can just be really tedious to use. I got to use a mouse, but this, for the price, again, it has one of the best. Apple's always, apart from the Surface Book and a few other laptops, Apple's known to always have some of the biggest and best, in my opinion, touchpads. This one is actually really good. People are saying it's bad. It's actually really good. Same with the keyboard. So all of that for the price, when you bundle it in together, it's really good. It's really polished. It has everything. It has the aesthetics, the build quality, has all the key features that someone will want when you're going into an entry-level MacBook. I'll be honest, the MacBook Neo, from the positives, is really good. Now we're going to come up with the negatives. Some of these are going to be deal breakers. Number one is there's no backlit keyboard. That is one of the biggest things that they've done deliberately to push you towards the Air. But if I turn the brightness off over here for a second, you can see that the keyboard, it's white anyway, or it's a lighter color. Now, I'd actually recommend, I believe silver is the best keyboard to get for visibility. But the keyboard is based like a slight off-tone blue, if that makes sense. So it's actually easy to see. It's not black like the MacBook Pros. And to be honest, the screen illuminates the keyboard. So using this in a dark area, where it's very dimly lit, I think that's not going to be an issue. Now I actually got a Neo to replace, this is my runaround laptop, my runaround Mac laptop. It's lightweight. I use for basic Word stuff, and I use it, by the way, and I've got like some of the highest end gear that you can get. But this has, as you can see, a backlit keyboard. So one of the things is if you're on a flight, and that's when I noticed the Neo the most, if you're on a flight, you're not going to have the backlit keyboard. So for a lot of people, this could be a deal breaker if you use it to travel, and that's one thing to bear in mind. The second thing is the SSD storage. Now, this is the problem. It only has 256 gigabytes. Now, should you upgrade to 512 for £100 extra or $100? I'll get onto that in a second. To be completely honest, it's not enough. For me, I think for the average person though, I think it's more than enough. If you use a lot of cloud storage, I think you're going to be fine. You don't want to use too much memory up because This does use memory swapping for RAM, which I'll come on to in a second. But I think you can consider upgrading to $100, but then maybe is it worth upgrading to a MacBook Air, which I'll go over towards the end of the video. So I think storage is one of the biggest caveats. You can't upgrade in the future. For £100 only, you also get the Touch ID. To be honest, with the current RAM and SSD prices, I don't think it's actually a bad option. But I would say storage is definitely one thing that this doesn't have, I think, for light uses. But once you install like Cyberpunk and you add loads of video editing, and that's when I think the storage is not enough, that's when you would struggle. And the third biggest thing is 8 gigabytes of RAM. Now that MacBook that I just showed you, and the MacBook Pro, the 13-inch M1, that actually runs 8 gigabytes of RAM also. At that time I bought it, it was only, I think it was £200 extra for 16 gigabytes. I think 8 gigabytes of RAM should be the absolute bare minimum for my task load, because I need 16 because I multitask a lot. For you watching this, if you're a student, you probably won't really max out on it. If you've let's say got ChatGPT open, you've got Word open, Excel, you've got Spotify, you've got YouTube open, and all those things that you're using, this should be fine. And the good thing is, if you do run out of RAM, you have memory swapping, which basically uses your SSD storage can like temporary RAM as well. So that's why you don't want to overfill your SSD too much, because that can affect your performance, because your RAM, if that runs out, it uses memory swap as well. So I think the RAM is the biggest caveat. I think for now, maybe the next 3 or 4 years, it's fine. Long term, that's when I think RAM will probably cost you. But again, there will be only for 1% of people watching this. And the RAM really affects you if you're doing like really heavy multitasking. So if you're doing like MacBook Pro style stuff on this laptop, let's say you're not just browsing the web, watching YouTube and doing emails and Zoom calls and basic documents, even just multitasking all those together, this laptop can handle all of that. But let's say you're doing crazy edits. So like this can actually edit in 4K. I've tried it. The average person, are they going to do it? Probably not. But it does struggle when you go towards like big timelines, big footages. That's when I say it's struggling. So if you're doing any form of crazy video editing, which this can do basic video editing like 1080p, TikToks, Instagram. I'm actually a consultant for content creators. I recommend this laptop for them. It's actually really good for base entry level, the average person. But if you're doing some powerhouse like crazy timelines, 4K editing, or you've got like you're programming, you're an editor, you're compiling lots of code, then I would say that's when 8 gigabytes of RAM will probably cost you a bit. And that's why I think it's worth upgrading to the MacBook Air, which again we'll go over towards the end. So if I think for heavier multitasking, it can be an issue. And there's a few other things as well. For example, it's got no SD card, but again, it's a MacBook Neo. I'm not going to complain too much. It's not meant to be used for any advanced editing. Just because it can do it doesn't mean it should be used for it. It's got no fan, so it can get quite hot over time, especially when you're using it really high intensive loads. As I said, really a lot of multitasking. Another thing is the ports. They're very basic. You've got like a high speed one and you got USB 2.0, whatever it is. You got 2 USB-Cs, which is not really ideal. But again, I think this is limited because the A18 chip inside, I think, can only support these two. That's the reason why it's like that. So I think, personally speaking, it's not bad. I mean, it's not the end. And again, this is not a MacBook Pro. And most people are probably just going to be plugging this in with a charger. They might use a dongle, maybe that's about it. But connecting this to a screen, it can only run one external screen as well. And you don't even get the full resolution. I think it limits up to like, I think 4K or something like that. But again, you're not going to be buying this if you're going to be connecting this to like an XDR or a studio display, are you? Maybe the fact it hasn't got MagSafe, but again, I think that's asking for too much. So would I recommend it? I think without a shadow of a doubt, I think if you haven't got a MacBook and you're maybe on Apple, you're not used Apple before, maybe on Windows and you're on a Chromebook, this is definitely worth getting. It's a good entry-level MacBook Neo. I mean, Apple been doing this for years, trying to get the younger audience, and I would say especially the lower prices, getting the average person into the market. But I think, you know what? It is actually a really good value. I think if you're a student, I'd recommend 100%. The only thing I would say is if you're doing a STEM degree, if you're doing like computer science like I did, or you're doing engineering and you're compiling a lots of code and editing, and you know you're doing a lot of programming, this can do basic programming. But anything advanced like degree level, this is not powerful enough. So I would say unless you're doing a STEM degree, I would say you'll probably go more than enough. It can do more than anything. You can open ChatGPT, Word, 20 Google Chrome tabs, and you're doing everything last minute like how I did, and you're having loads of research open. That's when I think, honestly speaking, this works very well. It won't freeze, it won't bottle up. it can probably do all those tasks very well. If you're an average person, let's say, for example, you're going to be using Zoom calls, emails, documents, searching online, banking online, maybe your grandma, your dad, or your mum, this is more than good enough. Even if you're like a semi-power user, I would say, and you do a lot of multitasking, let's say you're lazy, you want to edit even in Lightroom. I've done editing in Lightroom. It works very well. I've done Photoshop here, basic editing again with minimal layers. It still performs even though it's not a native app. Those work very well. Even Premiere editing, I've done it here, 1080p. It works very well indeed. So I think you can do this, and this laptop is more than good enough for the average person. There's no question about that. You know, at the max, we might be editing some TikTok reels, or Instagram reels, or some basic YouTube videos, 1080p. This laptop can handle it. So I don't think it's any worry from average person's perspective. Now, if you're a professional user or business user, don't get this laptop. I'm not saying it's a bad laptop, and it can probably do 90% of what you want to do. But that 10%, like I said, it can do like my basic stuff, but that 10%, it's going to struggle. So if you're a professional or you're like a video editor or photo editor, of course you should never skimp out. Invest in something good. A good machine will probably give you more money, more return than anything else. So I would say for a professional user, you can probably do 90% of what you want to do, but that 10%, that's where you'll struggle. So for a professional user and a business user, I would not recommend it unless you're doing very basic business tasks, like, you know, just doing emails and very basic stuff. I would not recommend it. I would say go invest in a MacBook Pro in that situation. Now I've got the Indigo version. Is it worth upgrading to the 512 gigabytes and you get the Touch ID? To be honest, that Touch ID is actually really good. You know, some of you've got Apple Watch. If you've got an Apple Watch, to be honest, you don't need it. Would you probably have an Apple Watch? Probably not. I'll be honest, considering the prices of SSDs now and RAMs, I think for £100, it's actually a good price. If you're a student, you're probably getting this for $499 anyway. But I'll come on to it in a second. In the UK for $699, I would say maybe it's not worth the upgrade. I'll explain to you why later on. But I think if you've got the money, maybe it's worth going for the storage. And what I want to do is I wanted to show you a comparison between the Neo, the MacBook Air, and the MacBook Pro. And you can see, for example, the MacBook Pro, it's 16 inches, 4 times the price. The MacBook Pro is almost 3 times the price. And the MacBook Air is just under double. Now, the thing is, you're getting an M5 chip, which is a formidable chip. Now, with the M5 compared to Neo, expect around maybe 20-25% in single core performance, but in multi-core performance is going to be almost double. So not only do you get a bit better screen real estate, you also get an M5 chip, and then it also starts at 16 gigabytes of RAM. Now, as I was saying, for me, I would use 16 gigabytes minimum for just basic Word documents or whatever. I think even basic multitasking, 8 gigabytes is fine. But I think if you can and you have the money, I would say definitely push towards the MacBook Air, because you also get 512 gigabytes of storage. So, you know, when you asked me earlier on, is it worth maybe spending £600 and then getting the upgrade to the storage? Well, I'll say if you can push, go towards MacBook Air, because you then get the Touch ID also included, and then you just get a bit better microphone as well. You get the same brightness, you also get True Tone and the wide color gamut of P3, and then you just get a bit better camera, sound system, microphone, and so on. And of course, you do get the backlit keyboard. So that is the big argument that I would say the better laptop is, of course, the MacBook Air. But as I said, you're paying £500 extra, but I would say for long-term use, let's say you wanted to keep this laptop for 4 years, 5 years, I would say the 16 gigabytes would make a big difference. That's my only regret that I have from getting that M1 MacBook Pro, and that was almost 6 years ago. I can still use it for basic tasks now, but for editing and more powerhouse kind of stuff, 16 gigabytes would have taken me further. Now, I know the price difference there is almost double, you could argue. It's £500 more. But the reason why I wanted to mention it is because if you're going for $699, I think at that point, it's only maybe a £300-400 difference. And I think it's worth pushing an extra mile. Now, what you could do is you could try to get a refurbished MacBook Air, but that's what everyone's been trying to do. And that's why they're completely sold out on Apple's refurbished site. Now, what my honest recommendation would be is try to find, if you're in the US, you might have Best Buy equivalent. You can get, for example, a 13-inch M4 from last year MacBook Air for £700. So for literally £100 more. So if you're going to go and find a MacBook Air for let's say £700, it's only going to be £100 more, but this way you're getting the 16 gigabytes, and you might get, if you're lucky, a better storage. It can be sometimes quite hard to get it, but depends right now because everyone is practically going now and buying the MacBook Air. But if you search good enough, there could be a chance. For example, like here you can see for £700 I get a 13-inch M4 MacBook Air with 512 gigabytes SSD, 16 gigabytes of RAM, and I can get it. It's sold out at the moment because everyone, I said, is currently flocking to go and buy these products. But if you're in the US, you're probably going to get a better price. So recommendations, finally, as I mentioned, if you're a student and you're not doing a STEM degree, and let's say you're doing basic multitasking, you're not doing 4K editing, though the average person, probably 99% of the population, this is definitely a good entry-level Mac. I think a MacBook Neo would probably last you a good couple of years. The only thing I would say is if you can push, go for the MacBook Air. As I mentioned, if you can't really afford the MacBook Air brand new, I would definitely recommend getting the refurbished option or looking secondhand for a MacBook Air, because you can spend £100, £200 more, but you'll get a laptop that will last you a longer period of time. Something that's definitely worth considering if you can't get the educational discount. If you can get this laptop for $499 if you're in the US, if you're in the UK as well. I think it's a good laptop. As I said, for students, for every single person. You're buying this for your grandma, your granddad, your mum and your dad. Even if they're just watching basic Netflix, they're doing Zoom calls, even with basic multitasking, as I mentioned, this is more than good enough. Even for my use case, I can do 90% of my daily tasks. Now, if it wasn't my job, I'd probably just have this as a throw around laptop. But the truth is, for me, it's probably not that good enough. But I'm editing in 4K, multi-timelines, I'm multitasking. I need that high productivity. I'm in the 1%, where other YouTube creators are also in that 1%. So if you're an aspiring YouTuber and you're doing crazy 4K multi-level edits, maybe you're doing a STEM degree like computer science, or let's say, for example, you're doing Excel, crazy multitasking, then obviously this is not the laptop for you. Could you get your job done? Probably 90%, but that's what I'd recommend. So definitely I would say it's worth it. Check out my video for 6 months time and how to get started with a Mac. And I would say if you've got the budget, definitely push towards that MacBook Air, especially if you're going to consider them 512 gigabytes of storage. Just push towards a MacBook Air if you can get it secondhand. But if your budget allows it, of course, go for the MacBook Air brand new. But if you are new to Mac, this is basically the best starter Mac you can get. Hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Thanks for watching. Take it easy. And of course, I'll catch you next time.